In the dim light of a still cold December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey walks down the hallway of her large home, located on 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado. She immediately notices something unusual as she descends the main staircase. A long, handwritten document rests on one of the steps, folded but still visible enough to cause concern. She approaches it, picks it up, and begins to read. The text, which appears to be a ransom note, demands the sum of $118,000. As she reads these words, she realizes that this amount matches almost exactly the Christmas bonus her husband, John Ramsey, had just received from his company, Access Graphics. The idea of a mere coincidence seems unlikely to her, and a growing anxiety sets in as she remembers that her little girl, JonBenét, is not in her bed. The following minutes unfold in a frantic urgency. Patsy glances at JonBenét's room and finds it empty, the bed unmade, the covers partially pushed aside. She immediately calls her husband, who joins her within moments, and tries to grasp the magnitude of the situation. The note mentions the threat of an imminent danger if the police are contacted, but Patsy, gripped by panic, sees no other option. At 5:52 a.m., she dials 911 to report her daughter's kidnapping. Her voice is urgent, and she asks for help immediately. The local law enforcement is alerted and sends 2 officers to the scene. When the officers step inside the house, the place is surprisingly calm, despite the palpable tension. There are no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no visible signs of a break-in at first glance. They quickly inspect the ground floor, find the letter left on the staircase, and question Patsy and John, who confirm having not noticed any suspicious noises during the night. The house, quite expansive, has multiple levels, including a basement accessible through some interior doors. The officers, not detecting any obvious anomalies, don't prioritize the basement for now, merely performing a cursory examination of the main rooms. Meanwhile, the parents, terrified at the idea that their daughter might be held somewhere, call close friends to bolster their support. Among them, Fleet and Priscilla White respond quickly, show up at the house and try to calm Patsy, who keeps dwelling on the unsettling content of the letter. JonBenét's absence gives everyone the feeling that every minute counts, although no one knows how to act in the face of such ambiguous ransom instructions and such an abrupt situation. The officers, busy documenting the initial details, advise them not to move too many objects, to leave things in place to allow for a more precise later analysis. The hours pass in a heavy atmosphere. As the morning progresses, the concern grows, as no additional contact request arrives from a possible kidnapper. There is neither a phone call nor an extra message. The information gleaned from the neighbors doesn't reveal any suspicious activity during the night. As time stretches on, the anxiety of the parents becomes almost unbearable, and they implore the police to push the search further. Around 1 p.m., Detective Linda Arndt, present on the scene, thinks it's time to thoroughly check every corner of the house. She asks John Ramsey and Fleet White to help verify even areas already assumed to be secure, including the basement, to ensure no clues have been overlooked. John then descends a staircase leading to the lower part of the house. The area is relatively dark. Steps resonate on the floor as he walks through some storage rooms. He finally opens a small door he believes was closed until then, and suddenly stops in complete silence. On the floor, he sees the still silhouette of JonBenét, wrapped in a blanket. The horror of the scene is immediate. The little girl is lying there. Duct tape covers her mouth. A cord is wrapped around her neck. Overcome by emotion and without considering the implications of such a discovery on the investigation, John lifts her in his arms to bring her into the light, still hoping to help her. Fleet White, following closely behind John, fully grasps the gravity of the situation and insists on calling Ricky Boris, an officer present on the upper floor. When John emerges from the basement and climbs the stairs, everyone in the house understands that the worst has happened. The child, carried to the living room, now rests in her father's arms, while Patsy collapses in tears not far away, in a state of shock. This hasty intervention disrupts the basement area, which should have been isolated to collect evidence. In the aftermath, the police seek to establish a security perimeter, but it's too late. The crime scene has already been compromised by the movement of the body. When specialized investigators arrive shortly after, they rush to document every remaining detail: the placement of the blanket, the footprints, the appearance of the room. The tape is carefully removed and preserved as evidence. Fiber, DNA, and fingerprint collection is in full swing. But the commotion in the house complicates the preservation of clues. The news spreads quickly in the neighborhood. This is no longer a kidnapping, but a homicide. The little victim never left the walls of the family home. The coroner, dispatched shortly after, performs a preliminary examination and confirms that the death resulted from strangulation with a garrote, associated with a severe head trauma. Given the position of the body and the nature of the marks, the doctor suspects a deliberate and particularly brutal criminal act. He does not make a complete diagnosis of the exact circumstances, as a detailed autopsy will take place in a more suitable medical setting. For now, the priority is to seal the scene and isolate the parents to gather their initial statements. The officers ask where, when, and how they discovered the letter, if the girl had reported anything strange, and how long the family had lived in this house. Within hours, journalists begin to pour into the neighborhood, alerted by the dissemination of information about a possible criminal case in one of the quiet streets of Boulder. The police, overwhelmed, try to contain the curiosity of the public and the media while supporting the shocked family. It quickly becomes apparent that the ransom letter, which is irrelevant in a context where the supposed victim is found dead, plays a pivotal role for the investigators. The author of this text is obviously the murderer, as the child was not kidnapped. The challenge, then, becomes to analyze the handwriting, spelling, every word, and every turn of phrase to try to identify or understand the intentions of the person who wrote it. As night begins to fall, the blue light of the police beacons illuminates the facade of the large mansion, highlighting the Christmas decorations still hanging on the windows and porch. The neighbors watch the scene from their own homes, worried and shocked by the tragedy unfolding just steps away. The officers block off the entrance, marking the boundary not to be crossed. Inside, Patsy and John are taken to another room to answer more specific initial questions. Who kept the front door locked? Who noticed the letter first? How JonBenét had been behaving in recent days. The parents' despair mixes with a generalized atmosphere of confusion. Investigators gradually discover the extent of the house, its nooks, its basement rooms, its corridors leading to several storage areas. They try to understand how a criminal, if coming from outside, could have moved through these places without being noticed. They also note that the letter demanded a specific amount, closely tied to John's business dealings, raising the possibility of an individual with intimate knowledge of the family's financial situation. The questions multiply, but the answers remain scarce. Hours stretch on, and everyone agrees on one point. The discovery of JonBenét in this basement shatters certainties and marks the start of a complex investigation that will engage the Boulder police for some time. In the summer of 1990, in Atlanta, JonBenét Patricia Ramsey is born into a wealthy family poised to shape her destiny in unexpected ways. Her father, John, runs a computer company named Access Graphics, specializing in the sale and support of computer systems. His success quickly allows the family to lead a comfortable lifestyle, while Patsy, his wife, is actively involved in raising JonBenét and her older brother Burke. A smiling and lively child, JonBenét grows up under the watchful eyes of parents wishing to offer her the best opportunities possible. Over the years, John is led to develop Access Graphics activities, and this professional expansion motivates the decision to relocate to Boulder, Colorado. The family then settles into a spacious home located on 15th Street in a rather upscale residential neighborhood, where large old houses stand alongside century-old trees. Everything seems to be going well for the Ramseys, whose social status rises along with John's influence in the business world. As soon as JonBenét learns to walk and talk, Patsy notices in her a strong interest in dance, singing, and performance. Eager to channel this energy, she enrolls her daughter in several child beauty pageants, which are very popular in certain regions of the United States. JonBenét participates in these regional contests, dressed in sparkling dresses, styled and made up to attract the attention of the judges. Photo shoots multiply, preparing the little girl for all sorts of fashion shows and stage presentations. The local and sometimes national media start taking an interest in her, dubbing her the mini-miss of Boulder. Photographs of this smiling little girl, wearing her pageant crowns and sashes, circulate in magazines and on some specialized television channels. Later, this image of a young beauty queen will become ingrained in the collective unconscious, when her name becomes associated with a tragedy that no one, at this stage, imagines. As the year 1996 draws to a close, so does the Christmas period, particularly cherished in American households. On the evening of December 25th, after the family festivities, John and Patsy head to their friends Fleet and Priscilla White's house for a dinner. Burke and JonBenét accompany them, and the evening passes without notable incident, in an atmosphere later described by all as warm and relaxed. The children are tired from the day's games and adult conversations. When the hour grows late, the Ramseys decide to return home, considering that it is time to put their children to bed. Outside, it is already very cold, and the snow begins to silently cover the streets of Boulder. The car stops in front of the large house on 15th Street, and everyone goes about their business while the parents put JonBenét to bed before going to rest in their room. At this precise moment, nothing hints at the drama that will unfold a few hours later. When the sun fully rises, several law enforcement representatives arrive to get acquainted with the situation and gather more testimonies. The former Boulder police chief, in later statements, admits that there were not, that morning, enough personnel trained in crime scene protocols. The few detectives present did not cordon off the house, did not control the movements, and the kitchen filled with coffee cups, ringing phones, and friends consoling the distraught parents. Several essential elements thus risk being lost or altered, compromising the collection of valid scientific evidence. Meanwhile, the investigators try to learn more about the ransom letter, with its both direct and strange style, and its vaguely military tone. Some words even echo phrases read in movies, and the specificity of the amount of John's bonus intrigues the police, who wonder if it is a well-informed insider or a particularly knowledgeable outsider. Hypotheses form in urgency, but no real consensus emerges. Several inspectors then question John, Patsy, and Burke to clarify the previous evening's schedule. They want to understand at what time the family returned from the White's dinner, who heard noises during the night, and when JonBenét was last seen. The answers sometimes vary according to each one's memory, which is not surprising after such a shock, but this complicates the establishment of a precise timeline. The police also note that there is no broken door or obviously shattered window, although some openings remain poorly locked or partially accessible. This absence of signs of forced entry, in the context of an unusual ransom, leads some investigators to consider that a setup might have been organized from inside the house itself. Others remain convinced that someone could have entered the home, quite possibly through the basement or a discreet entrance. No one dares to decide, and hours pass without JonBenét reappearing. At this moment, the investigation fragments into two possible directions. Should the family be considered the victim of an external kidnapper, determined enough to write a long and strange letter, or should we suspect an internal mechanism, with a scenario arranged to make it look like an abduction? Local authorities choose not to officially rule out anything and continue their investigations in a contradictory manner. On the one hand, they examine potential external leads, and on the other, they begin to delve into the past of the Ramseys, including the world of beauty pageants where JonBenét is known. Meanwhile, the house continues to buzz with whispers and comings and goings until the most shocking discovery occurs, forever changing the course of the case. During 1997, the Boulder police identify more than 1,600 people who could be questioned, but they ultimately focus their checks on John and Patsy Ramsey. At the same time, confidential information finds its way into the press, while self-proclaimed experts and investigative journalists publish books about the case. Debates multiply on television, and some of the public begin to doubt the parents' version, believing they might be connected to their daughter's death. Others, however, are convinced that the couple is the target of unfounded accusations, and that the police are neglecting an external lead. This split is felt at all levels and considerably influences subsequent operations. Very quickly, the county prosecutor contacts Lou Smith, an investigator with a long career who has already solved several complex murders. He comes out of retirement at the beginning of 1997 and reviews every accessible detail. He examines the scene photos, inspects the house entries, studies the injuries, and rereads the expert reports. His observations lead him to support a hypothesis that is unpopular at that time. The layout of the basement, the presence of an already broken window, the possibility of entering the house through the basement, as well as traces of supposed electric shock, and the existence of unknown DNA on the victim's clothes, according to him, constitute evidence in favor of an external intrusion. However, this scenario provokes growing opposition from several members of the investigation team, who continue to strongly suspect a criminal act committed within the family circle. As Lou Smit tries to convince his colleagues, internal tensions grow. Steve Thomas, one of the investigators handling the case, declares himself convinced of the parents' responsibility. He helps with the chronological reconstruction, but quickly encounters interference from the prosecutor's office, which he deems contrary to the serenity of the investigation. This situation leads him to resign, while Lou Smit also leaves the case, believing that no one is paying enough attention to the hypothesis of an outsider. September 1998. Faced with this conflicting atmosphere, the prosecutor decides to convene a grand jury in Boulder. For several months, these jurors collect testimonies, material evidence, various expert reports, and analyses of the handwritten letter. They also examine photos taken in the basement and strive to determine the precise sequence of acts that led to the girl's death. In 1999, after prolonged debate, they issue an official opinion called a true bill and recommend indicting John and Patsy Ramsey for exposing the child to danger that led to her death. Prosecutor Alex Hunter, however, chooses not to pursue this course. He refuses to endorse the grand jury's decision, explaining that he lacks sufficiently strong elements for a trial that could lead to a certain conviction. This stance, closing this part of the proceedings, remains largely unknown to the public for a long time. When the medical examiner inspects the body, he first identifies a deep mark around the neck, caused by a nylon rope garrote, then notices a severe skull fracture that worsens the diagnosis. The strangulation device is made up of a broken paintbrush handle, apparently taken from Patsy's painting supplies, which immediately intrigues the investigators. The death is officially classified as a homicide, and the forensic examination also reveals genital injuries considered compatible with a form of assault, without signs of rape in the usual sense. This point fuels many speculations from the start because it suggests a violent and deliberate act, but it does not clearly identify the perpetrator. Experts note that there is a mix of physical evidence, partial traces, and elements that may have been deposited before or after death, making the interpretation of the basement complex. Additional analyses are attempting to determine when these lesions were inflicted, under what precise conditions, and especially why the child ended up in this hidden basement, while a ransom note claimed to keep her alive somewhere outside. Shortly after discovering the body in the basement, two main interpretations began to emerge. Supporters of the first theory believe that everything in this case resembles an internal staging. They point out that the basement isn't truly devastated. The girl is found wrapped in a blanket, a gesture that may betray an emotional connection from the person who placed her that way. They also note that the doors and windows show no explicit signs of forced entry, except for a window that has been damaged for some time, and recall that the body was moved before the medical examiner arrived, complicating the authenticity of the scene. In their view, the idea of an external hostage situation quickly becomes improbable because no real ransom demand is actually initiated after the letter is written, and the so-called kidnapping lasts barely a few hours before the body is discovered at the Ramseys' home. The proponents of this hypothesis also rely on the public persona of the family, with a little beauty queen regularly in the spotlight, and deduce that a family secret, an incident, or a voluntary act might have been concealed behind this letter, and seemingly crafted clues to mislead the police. On the other hand, investigators like Lou Smit and some external specialists, including former FBI profiler John Douglas, see in this case the signature of an intruder who had wandered for a long time in the house. They mention the possibility of entry through the basement via the already cracked window, and imagine that the child may have been surprised or even neutralized with a stun gun before being dragged to the basement. Proponents of this scenario emphasize that it is possible an unknown assailant took the time to explore the rooms, find the notebook to write or copy the letter, and carefully format it in hopes of convincing of a proper kidnapping.
From their perspective, the fact that the ransom amount corresponds to a known city bonus may simply mean the individual is familiar with John's professional circle or had heard of this sum within a restricted circle. They also insist on certain footprints and the idea that an unauthorized visitor might have closed the door, hidden, then left the house before the police sealed off the scene. In this context, the presentation of the body under a blanket can result as much from a camouflage impulse as any feeling of remorse. This approach leaves the question of the letter unanswered. Was it written under stress during the night, or was it prepared in advance? Everything remains possible if we accept that the intruder has enough time. In the early 2000s, the investigation into the girl's death refocused on the careful examination of all available physical evidence. The Boulder police, constantly seeking new avenues, faced the limitations of the techniques of the time. In December 2002, prosecutor Mary Lacey took over the case and ordered a new analysis of certain items, notably the victim's clothing. She wished to understand if tiny genetic traces, sometimes left by mere contact, could shed light or invalidate the current hypotheses. Specialized laboratories then began developing more sensitive methods, able to detect DNA profiles even when the amount of biological material seemed very small. In 2003, results were revealed confirming the presence of an unknown male profile. This discovery immediately caught the investigators' attention, as the genetic fingerprint found did not belong to the father, mother, or brother of the victim. At this stage, the hypothesis of a person outside the family gained credibility, although the police did not want to draw hasty conclusions. Scientists specified that contact DNA might originate from an unexpected source, such as a handled object or rubbed fabric, but investigators still considered this new element as a possible sign of intrusion. In 2006, the case experienced another twist when an American teacher named John Mark Carr, then living in Thailand, claimed to have killed JonBenét. The confession, reported by journalists, triggers a wave of reactions. The FBI and Boulder police mobilize, and Carr is transferred to the United States for questioning and compared to the available evidence. His account, delivered imprecisely, quickly proves to be incompatible with the observations in the case file. DNA analyses rapidly show that he does not match the unknown male profile found on the clothing. Furthermore, some details he provides to the police do not align with the certified timeline of the evening when the little girl was found, undermining the credibility of his confession. After this brief media frenzy, Carr is dismissed as a serious suspect. However, his involvement fuels public mistrust toward future revelations, as it seems this case attracts individuals eager to claim responsibility for various reasons. Nonetheless, investigators continue to explore other leads, including those related to known individuals in the area, such as Gary Oliva or Michael Helgoth, frequently mentioned in rumors. They too undergo precise checks, but neither their genetic profiles nor their timelines support a direct link to the crime scene. In July 2008, Mary Lacey takes a significant step by publishing an open letter to John Ramsey. In this document, she officially clears the father, mother, and even the victim's brother, citing the incompatibility between their DNA and that found on the child's clothing. In her statement, she explains how scientific advancements have allowed better interpretation of these traces and apologizes on behalf of the institution for the long-standing suspicion on the family. This public communication then shifts the focus of the investigation toward the possibility of a completely external perpetrator. American and international media widely relay the news, highlighting that after so many years of family hypotheses, the future of the case now rests on finding an unknown individual. In 2009, Boulder police officially resumed control of the investigations, which are labeled a cold case while remaining classified as active. Authorities assert that they have not given up, but acknowledge the difficulty of restarting on a reliable basis after the time elapsed and the potential errors that may have occurred. Starting in 2010, several technologies emerge in the forensic field, particularly increasingly fine techniques and the possibility of comparing DNA profiles to growing databases. Investigators announced their intent to exploit everything modern science can offer,
but the case remains complex. Many people have already been ruled out, and no new matches emerge when their profiles are compared with the infamous male sample. The investigations thus remain at a standstill, even though the case sporadically reactivates as new clues or new witnesses appear. In the 2010s and 2020s, the media coverage of the case takes on unprecedented proportions, thanks to documentaries broadcast on cable channels and streaming platforms. Production teams, sometimes from major media companies, strive to closely reconstruct the context and potential unexplored gray areas. Investigation podcasts regularly update listeners on current scientific advancements, interview former police officers, criminology experts, and family members. Some documentaries, including one produced for Netflix, focus on the DNA trail and emphasize genetic genealogy, a technique that involves comparing an unknown sample with partial profiles from various family registers. This approach, already used to solve other complex cases, has not yet produced a decisive result here. Journalists note that over 1,000 people have been interviewed over the years, and numerous DNA profiles have been compared to the detected print, without a formal match. In January 2025, John Ramsey becomes the center of attention again by meeting the new Boulder police chief, accompanied by a genetics expert. The local authorities, responsible for the ongoing investigations, now appear more open to using the latest techniques, including genetic genealogy. John Ramsey remains confident, believing that the key is to determine if the unknown DNA fragment can finally be linked to a family or common ancestor. Investigators admit that several material pieces, preserved in archives and stored securely until now, are undergoing reanalysis at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. They hope to obtain a reliable lead, even a name, thanks to the constant evolution of science.